Oh, hello, my lovely, and welcome to this week's episode of Lotus Life The Podcast. My name is Rose Tautari, and I am, among many things in this lifetime, a human design guide, a soul mentor, an author, and a podcaster. And this is a podcast where each week we get to hang out and chat about all things human design. I'm here to teach you how you can thrive in your most aligned life by empowering yourself to understand your unique soul's purpose. Human design is a beautiful synthesis bringing together ancient wisdom and modern science, and is a way of understanding that contract that your soul and the universe made for who you came here to be, what you came here to do, and what karma you came to correct this lifetime around. This podcast, Lotus Life, is a celebration of embodying the lotus flower that blooms and thrives, growing from even the murkiest of conditions in life. And it just celebrates that awesomeness of being the imperfectly perfect human being that you came here to be. Get ready to lotus your life. Now, this week's episode is all about relationships and how human design is such an incredible way of deepening our understanding and our appreciation and our empowerment around the various relationships that we have in this human experience. So in my view, I just am so wholeheartedly behind the fact that in this new paradigm we're moving into, it needs us to be bringing the energy of compassion and understanding, more celebration of our uniqueness as individuals, while also recognizing that we're not separate. You know, there is no separation from one another. We are all a piece of the light. We're all a piece of the divine. We're all just stardust. And we've come here in this lifetime with a purpose, right? So using things like human design, I just am so passionate about sharing, and how it's such a powerful means to empower ourselves to not only have a beautiful relationship with others, but to have a beautiful relationship with ourselves as well. You know, just fully and truly understanding who you are and who you came here to be in this life, you know, before the rest of the world tried to tell you who you should be. So it's not just a tool for, I guess, understanding how you can interact more consciously and with more compassion, more empathy with the other people in your life, but it's also the way you can flip that around and hold up that mirror and do exactly the same thing for yourself. You know, start with your own soul and loving yourself more. So you've probably heard me talk before about new paradigm parenting, and how my deepest wish is that every child in the future can go home from the hospital with their copy of their human design chart, so that parents are empowered to raise their children with that new paradigm style of parenting in mind, you know, of empowering a child from day one, of not projecting their own issues or conditioning or fears or insecurities, or, you know, even just their own energy type onto their child, expecting that their child will grow and learn and develop in the same way as they have. And also when it comes to relationships, you know, it's just so incredible because it's understanding at such a deep level with empathy and compassion, just everything in relationships, you know, whether that's romantic relationships, whether that's our relationships with our family, our friends, our loved ones, you know, it's everything that goes from the way individual people make decisions the best, the way they show up and thrive the best, attitudes towards money, to material things, energy dynamics, you know, even parenting styles, and also, you know, understanding at a more deep level, like just the simple facts of codependency and how that shows up for individuals. So honestly, the sky's the limit when it comes to getting into talking about human design, but it's also wonderful in the sense that I truly believe that there's a huge opportunity for it to be brought into workplaces, how it could be more integrated with things like our community systems and structures, things like social welfare. There's so many practical places where this knowledge could create real meaningful change. It's not a prescriptive, do this one thing and this is the outcome. It's still fluid, it's still an experiment, it's still flow, it's still energy dynamics, but it just allows an approach with the new paradigm energy of going, rather than categorizing people or creating separation, it's being able to truly understand and empower everyone to thrive with that just deep sense of love for one another, for the soul level of one another, right from day one. It's no longer being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff for our society. It's going, let's have this knowledge front and center and in our mainstream, language and thoughts and structures and systems right from day one. It doesn't need to be, wait till you're middle of your life to put it into place. Let's start having it as part of the conversation and the open conversation from much earlier in the piece. So at a real core level, what I want to cover in this episode is how we can bring it into how we look at relationships with others, how human design can come in at that relationship and human to human interaction. So, at the most obvious level, this could come up in terms of just simply, how do the 5 different energy types that currently exist, how do they interact with each other? How is that sort of, for want of a better word, perfect synthesis or harmony between the energy types, the 5 energy types? How does that sort of work? So, because if you've listened to previous episodes, if you haven't, I would highly recommend going back and just checking out some of the real quick couple of minute cover episodes that I did, soundbite episodes on the 5 different energy types. Yeah, so each type has got its own unique way of showing up in the world, right? It's got its own unique aura, it's got its own unique set of strategies and tools with which the soul can thrive as the energy type. So you've got the 5 types being manifestors, generators, manifesting generators, projectors, and reflectors. So in the kind of, I guess, the utopia sort of view, the example I like to give is, if you can imagine, say, animals on the Serengeti plain, for example, that you've got your manifestors are like the leaders of the pack or the herd, going, this is the direction we're going and I'm choosing, and I'm the one that is informing all of you which direction we're going, and I'm leading, and if you want to follow me, you can follow me, but if you don't, then fine, stay behind. You've got the generators and manifesting generators that are the sort of the magnetic, charismatic collective. They're the kind of 70% of the energy of our community. They're the ones that have got the energy to bring all of the tribe with them, going, yep, we are coming along, and we can see that this is the way we need to go and how we need to go about it, but we're also making sure that the rest of the tribe are cared for and catered for, and we're carrying the ones who are weaker, and we're shouldering the burden of the ones who need that support in the moments they need it. They've got that real life force drive to ensure that the whole of society moves forward. It's a really beautiful energy. You've got reflectors, who are the 1%, basically, and what their role is to almost sit in the midst of that herd, in the midst of that community, and they're the ones who are essentially reflecting back to everyone around them how healthy, how successful, how, energized, how spiritually and soul connected that community is. And they're really there to be the kind of barometer for health, so to speak, for the tribe around them, the community around them. And projectors are they're the guides, they're the wisdom, they're the ones who are sitting up, maybe the birds up in the branches of the trees, and they're the ones who can see ahead. they've got the distance vision. They can sort of remove themselves from the ground level energy and go, I'm going to sit here on my vantage point and I can see what's going on. I can see where we need to go as a collective. We can see what's coming up ahead, and then choose that moment when they want to use their sort of energy and their gifts to move to the next vantage point and then share with the tribe and the community from there. So in a sort of, I guess, like a example, that's really how it would sort of sit in terms of energetically between all the different energy types. So in terms of relationships and how they all work together, you know, there's nothing to say here that a projector will only kind of get on with another projector, right? Because obviously there are so many nuances and variations within each individual person's human design. So ultimately, the people you're going to vibe with, your soul community, your friends, your family, you know, the way you're going to naturally connect with other souls is still going to come down to those who have got a similar set of values or a similar way of showing up in the world as you, that you energetically connect with. And so this might mean that you could be completely different energy types, for example, but you connect on a soul level over not only your lived experiences and enjoyments and joy and interests, but, you know, it can come down to something like, say, for example, your profile. So if, for example, you are both 6-2s in your profile, you can be completely different energy types, but you just have that deep soul knowing of the way your profiles both show up in the world that are really similar. And that's what you connect on. And that's what you really, you know, just have that inner knowing that your souls are here for similar purposes. So another example is that you could be, again, different energy types and different profiles, but within the human design body graph, the chart, you could have lots of the lines that are highlighted within, lit up within your specific design, connect up almost like end to end, so to speak, and with another person's design when they come into contact with each other. So think of in any of the spaces in your chart where you've got just sort of the little half lines that don't connect up to another center. Think of them. They're like little magnetic ends waiting for the corresponding other end to come along. And then when that does, and they interact with someone, with another aura, another person who has got those magnetic ends that click up and click together, that almost is like that saying where, you know, we complete each other or you complete me. Like that is really what's going on energetically. It's beautiful. It's that harmony in the way that you and another person are designed. So, and those two ends sort of magnetize together energetically and complete each other. And it's kind of like a grounding energy. It's a real peaceful sort of coming home moment that you go, oh, wow, I just feel so safe and secure with this person because your energetics have really kind of grounded each other and given that sense of completion. So, you know, it might energetically feel like in those sort of relationship dynamics, like you literally finish each other's sentences, so to speak, on maybe a physical, you know, verbal sense, but also energetically deep within your souls. So one of the things that I want to first touch on in terms of relationships, because probably one of, you know, aside from romantic relationships, one of the most challenging but rewarding relationships is obviously anything to do with parenting. You know, that's one of just about everyone, there's some sort of parenting relationship they've got on, whether it's, you know, your own with your own parents, that you maybe as an adult have still got issues that you're sort of working through with your own parents, because who doesn't, you know, at the end of the day, whether it's reparenting yourself, your own inner child, or whether it is, you know, that you are in a parenting role for children and young people in your life. So, you know, parenting is something that I've more and more lately found myself talking about. And I'm super passionate about how human design comes into new paradigm parenting. For those of you who follow me online, you'll know that Darren and I chose to homeschool our nearly 15-year-old last year. He's a projector, and just the school that he was going to is a wonderful school. And I wholeheartedly, when he first started there, thought that was the best choice at the time. But it pretty quickly became clear to us that he was not thriving in that environment. And at that crucial age of 14 years old at the time, we just said, why wait and see, how this either does or doesn't work out for him. If he's struggling right now and he's not thriving, what can we do to empower him as a projector energy type to thrive? Because the way he shows up in the world and is his best, most magical, highest self doesn't quite fit with the way in which our traditional schooling system has been structured and has been set up, and it will work for some kids and some kids will thrive in that, and he just wasn't one of them. So we've been doing the homeschooling journey for just over a year now, and we've just got a completely different kid. We've got a happy, thriving child at home, and that is, or teenager, sorry, I should really be using the word teenager these days, but so this is just something that I'm really passionate, and I think within 2020, obviously, for just about every parent around the world has had to have a taste of that experience of homeschooling their kids and what that's looked like, and how their children have either really found that environment to be so much more nourishing and supportive, and they've seen firsthand how much happier their kids are, or through to the kids that have really struggled with not being able to be around their friends, not being in that high energy, vibrant, lots of people around environment. So, this is why human design is so wonderful, because we all have our own unique way of showing up and thriving, and it's not a one size fits all. So that's, in a very long-winded way, that's what I want to touch on first. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, more other relationship dynamics, whether it's romantic relationships, whether it's relationships with friends, family, etc. So if you think about it in terms of parenting, reparenting, the design that you're born with is what stays with you throughout this lifetime, your lifetime. So for those of you who are listening who are parents, imagine that feeling of if you brought your baby home for the first time and it literally came with a user manual that you could choose to dip in and out of if you so wish. I can imagine that, for every new parent out there, you probably joked at some time or another that you wished your baby came with an instruction manual, right? Well, now you know that in human design, they kind of actually do. So, and it's obviously not a hard and fast rule book of a set of binding principles, but it gives you this insight into how your little person is naturally and truly going to show up in this world. It's going to give you an insight into who they truly are, and there's a good chance that they could have plenty of your traits in their design, DNA energetically, but they'll also have their own unique thing going on depending on what was happening energetically at the time they were born. So, a little bit at a very, broad level, the thing that is mostly in our, common knowledge and understanding is, just simply going star signs, right? That's probably the most readily discussed aspect of going, oh yeah, there's such a Virgo, for example. But, this is taking that and magnifying it down to every last detail. So it's really powerful. It's really incredible. You guys have heard me talk before about the kind of specific detail it goes into. So probably the first thing that is so incredibly powerful to know as a parent is, or even if you're looking at this from the lens of going, I'm reparenting my own inner child, is just to even know that whether your child or the inner child is an energy being, being a generator or a manifesting generator with their sacral chakra defined, or whether your kiddo or inner kiddo is a non-energy type, right? So projector, reflector, and I include manifestors in this because they don't have their sacral defined, but they have their own unique sort of energy expression, like that comes into it when it's their decision or their desire. They've got like a whole nother kind of motor going on. So they are technically in this category, but they're kind of a whole unique expression. So for the sake of it, I'm including them as a non-energy type. But so anyway, as a parent, if you have got a generator or a manifesting generator, your child is going to have a motor from their sacral chakra that literally doesn't run out until the moment they are ready to go to bed, right? Like, these are the kids that are active, they're noisy, their sacral chakra is vibrating away, talking all day long. So these are the kids that are like constantly humming, constantly talking to themselves, constantly sort of making funny little noises, maybe got their own language going on with their siblings, They're a ball of just gorgeous life force energy in your life. They're on the go. And so remembering as well that generators and manifesting generators make up 70% of the world's population. So chances are not only are you as the parent one of either a generator or manifesting generator, but that your kids could be too. So in specifically looking at generator kids or your inner child, they need that physical outlet for their energy, right? Their sacral chakra is like a motor. It's like having a full tank of gas every day that gets magically given to them. So you might be going like, oh my God, we did so much yesterday. And today they're just like, boom, back, ready to go. They're not tired at all. Like, these are the generator kids, right? They love movement. They love exploration. They love getting into, kind of one thing and getting really good at it. So challenging themselves physically, mentally, creatively, and it's all about having plenty of social relationships. Generators are social creatures, like they're really open auras, they're magnetic, they're charismatic. So having plenty of those social relationships and play dates is really crucial for them. And then when their gas tank finally does run out, right? And as a parent, you might be going, finally, thank fuck. Like, you might be saying to yourself at the end of the day, when you're like, holy shit, they've just been like, go, go, go all day long. That's when they get their chance to rest and recharge. And sorry to say, but their battery, their sacral chakra does recharge every single night. So just be prepared that tomorrow morning they're raring to go and they're full noise from the moment they open their eyes, right? And generator kids will be incredibly nourished when you give them things to respond to all day long. And I don't mean like you have to physically set up stuff for them to do all day long. I'm just saying like their sacral or gut instinct that is kind of like that's their yes or no answer, always immediately in the moment, right? Like, so they're going to bumble through life, happily humming along and full of energy. And like everything that they kind of come across in their path is going to be do I like this? Do I not? Am I excited by this? Am I not excited by this? Like, so you can kind of put yourself through looking at it through their lens. Like, they're just literally going to kind of energetically bump into everything throughout their day and respond to that as it comes to them. And it's in the moment. So for example, your generator kid might struggle if you give them options that are too vague, for example. So think of it as like you can empower them by asking questions like, do you want to go to the park now? Rather than maybe kind of a more vague option, which might be this afternoon, what do you want to do? Like, so your generator kiddo can answer the yes or no stuff really easily, straight away, gut reaction. And it'll be like, hell yeah, this excites me, or it'll be a, nah, no, not for me. And it's kind of like, just don't take it personally either. Like, that's just their gut telling them, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Rather than the kind of vague, give them lots of options because their sacral can't respond to that. There's open-ended. So that's something you can kind of, I guess, like tuck in your back pocket as a parent of a generator and go, okay, these are some of the things. And obviously, this is just a quick coverall for the types, but there's so much more detail that we can get into, you know, in terms of understanding that dynamic in the relationship. But think of these as kind of like the general guidelines. So manifesting generator kids, they need your permission as their parent to be spontaneous, to be changeable, to pick things up excitedly, but then also put that thing down just as quickly. Like, many gens really are here to be the creative spark of always looking to do something new, and need that permission of not having any kind of shoulds put on them as they grow up. Like, ensuring that they know it's a positive thing for them, and not to kind of condition or project onto them any kind of shoulds around like, oh, but you should stick to one thing at a time, right? Like, many gens, they are the active multitaskers of the world, and they can actually do a lot of things at the same time compared to all the other energy types, and they can do it successfully, but they're also designed to go fast and to skip steps. So it's kind of like, you know, if you're not a Mani Gen yourself as a parent, it might be really confusing, this kind of whirlwind of energy in your child that you're not quite sure how to handle, but just trust that having ability to do multiple projects, to have multiple ways they can play or express themselves, to be exploring, to be experimenting, to be burning off that sacral energy. Because remember, these types have got the sacral energy going all day long as well. So allow them to show up and thrive, but also like learn to be the parent that kind of just chills. If they are that kid who is only interested in something for like a few moments and then moves on to the next thing, please don't take it personally as their parent if it's something that you got them or set up for them and they kind of don't show the dedication to it that you possibly would as have done as a child or as an adult. And MGs, Mani Gens, they thrive when they get the chance to try things on kind of in their mind first, right? And then feel into that gut voice of whether it's a hell yes or a hell no, right? They probably will get really frustrated and express that potentially as anger or like venting their frustration if the world isn't running as fast as they want it to. So you can empower them to understand that their speed is different. And it's not a bad thing. It's just that it's almost like empowering them to understand how to have empathy for others around them who maybe aren't quite going at their pace, or that if life and all the, you know, things in life that need to happen are not quite going at the pace that they want it to. Now, conversely, projector or reflector children. These are what we would call the non-energy beings, right? Like they're gonna show up in spurts of activity, but for a lot of the time are going to be pretty content doing their own thing a lot as well. So, you know, projectors are about 20% of the population. And this is where, you know, we flip from the sacral beings over into another realm altogether when it comes to energetics and the way they show up in the world. So a projector is going to thrive when they can fully immerse themselves in whatever it is they're interested in. Like they will just submerge into their own world. Anything, play, creativity, reading. Like for me, as a kid, I was such a bookworm. And I could also, when I was really young, like just spend hours with my things in my room on my own, creating all these imaginary worlds. Like I didn't have a single care for the outside world. I was just happy in my own bubble for hours and hours and hours on my own, right? Darren, as a projector as well, like when he was young, he was so into creativity, art, would just like lock himself away in his room with his music, you know, so he very much enjoyed having those sort of like niche interests of music and, you know, even just like being in the bath for hours, for example, like that kind of thing when he was little. So, yeah, so for projectors, light movement is going to be more their thing. Probably more so than like all day long go. Like they'll probably have like a spurt of things that they want to do, but it might be a little bit more gentle. And having plenty of that restorative time alone. So think like low stimulation, right? Like they are easily going to be overstimulated, these kids. And, you know, projectors will enjoy being social when it feels right for them, right? When it's, you know, if you lean into like what's aligned, what's not aligned, but will take a while to kind of warm up in a social situation, especially if it's new people or a new environment, right? And remember that in terms of the way a projector shows up and thrives is by being invited, right? Like waiting for the invitation. So naturally, as a child, they won't even realize that that's what it is, but that's where that, you know, probably being resistant to just inserting themselves into another child's game or environment, that's just their natural flow, their natural energetics, their way of showing up. So you can kind of go, okay, well, rather than being like, oh my God, my kid is so painfully shy, or putting a negative spin on it that you as an adult are projecting onto them, it's actually just a projector child showing up in the correct way for them energetically. And if they're invited in by the other kids, or they feel like the energy is now a space where it invites them to join in, then they'll be away laughing and they'll probably love it. So you can kind of see how like some of these things, like it just takes that moment of flipping it in your mind as an adult or a parent and just realizing like, oh, okay, that's why, like, they just show up differently. It's not a bad thing. Like, nothing is inherently bad, right? Now, reflectors they're going to thrive with having plenty of opportunity to rest, because remember, they move through the moon's cycle. So they follow the moon as their authority to kind of guide them to how they're going to be feeling on any given day. So they're going to be very energetically aligned with whatever phase the moon is in. And they'll have days when they're like all on energetically, and then they'll have periods where they'll go within and they'll recharge. But they'll very much be the child or the inner child who adapts to every situation and every environment and kind of absorbs the characteristics like a chameleon of who they are around. You know, it's that environment or the people they're around, they'll kind of take on that persona, that color, so to speak, and it'll mean that they suddenly get, like, you know, maybe out of the blue, they might get really into something for a while and then drop it. So it's kind of allowing plenty of exploring as a parent to a reflector child, but without putting labels on anything. It's like just going, whatever interests you, play, movement, learning, reading, exploration, you know. Socially, reflectors will really enjoy being around that energy of people, but not necessarily wanting to be the center of attention, so to speak, right? And remember that reflectors are only 1% of the world's population. So if you run your child's chart through My Body Graph, and they are a reflector, I would just wholly put my hand on my heart and say, please learn as much as you can about reflectors, like how you can support them to thrive. And if you want, come and let me know if you've got questions, because reflectors are such unicorns. They're so special and they need to be supported by the environment and the people they're around on a day-to-day basis. So that's my biggest sort of caveat to include with that if you're a parent to a reflector, like just arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can about reflectors and get their chart read. So then manifestors, lovely manifestors are literally going to be the kid who rules the show from the moment they enter your life. Like, they arrive already calling the shots, right? And probably catch you completely unaware as a parent. So if you've got a manifestor for a child, just almost like take a breath and know, like, just get comfortable with the fact that they're going to go and do whatever they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it. And it's not because they're being naughty or purposely trying to defy you. It is just the manifestor following their desires. And obviously, as the parent, or, you know, you're helping them to establish their own safe boundaries, to learn their own methodology for staying safe and staying healthy, and learning how to thrive within kind of the parameters of life and your environment and your home. But they're pretty much in control already of their own destiny from the second they arrive Earthside. So manifestor kids are the ones that they want that freedom to explore, to learn, to indulge themselves in, you know, whatever it is that they want to do. So it's kind of like just going, I can actually just release my grip and not try and impose an artificial structure like that you've put onto them. And they'll really thrive in bursts of using their energy, followed by rest and recharge, kind of off time, right? Like they'll have bursts when they're like all on and all into whatever it is they desire. And then they'll sort of like go within their shell again. So, and they'll have their really tight crew. They'll have their friends. They'll have their people that they just like are desperate to spend time with and love spend time with. And they'll probably be that kid that's like nagging you constantly to see that one friend that they always really love hanging out with. But, you know, but equally, they'll also be incredibly selective about who they allow in, right? That's the manifestor's aura is there to kind of designed to like be selective, because it's only going to allow the right people in that are right for them. So there are also going to be these people that like don't take it personally, because they won't want you to just set up any old play date, right? Like if you're a parent that's trying to set up a play date, you'll probably have a revolt on your hands if you do just set something up and kind of it's not their idea, right? Even if you think it's right for them, a manifestor will know. They'll know whether it's right for them or not. So manifestors really thrive when they inform you of what it is they're wanting to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it. And they kind of need a whole lot of encouragement and love to just ensure that they understand that informing, you know, letting you know as their parent isn't necessarily asking your permission every time. It's kind of like once they've learned their safe boundaries, for example, they can be supported. Because manifestors can grow up to be really heavily conditioned that, you know, they almost grow up thinking if they've not been encouraged to inform, they'll grow up thinking that like that process of letting other people know what they're doing, they might have learned over time that actually what it means is that they let someone know and then they get talked out of it because the other person puts all their judgments and expectations and opinions onto them and tries to stop them from doing the thing they want to do, right? So if you're a manifestor or even a manifesting generator with that kind of more manifestor ability, like that's where they grow up and as adults stop letting others know, and they kind of go away and do stuff but like almost in secret, right? They don't want to be open. They don't want to trust. They don't feel it's safe. So as a parent, you can kind of just empower them to know that in your home, in your relationship, it's an open dynamic. It's an open conversation. It's a trusting, safe space that empowers them to thrive, and that they are given that kind of, you know, like that license to come to the table with their way of thinking and their desires, and to let you know, so that it's like you're included in the conversation as a parent, you know, which is a bit of a role reversal, and I know is probably like really hard to get your head around in new paradigm parenting, but you know, it's a beautiful dynamic for a manifestor because they really are here to be unique. They're only about 8% of the world's population, so they're the ones that are here to create, initiate, flick the dominoes of the universe, right? So they've got their unique gifts. It might just look really different to how, you know, society has probably imposed all these opinions and ideals and structures on what a parent-child relationship should look like. And a manifestor as a child flips that dynamic on its head. So it's kind of just learning to grow and use it to everybody's best ability. So, you know, ultimately, you know, the beauty of knowing energy types and the beauty of knowing just even that higher level interaction of the 5 types and you know, the parent-child relationship is that you can trust as a parent that your job is to be here to, you know, to raise your kids to thrive, right? That's ultimately the goal. And in the new paradigm, it's not about imposing arbitrary structures or rules or the shoulds, right? You know, and I always say should in inverted commas, like if you could see me through the microphone. But it's like, it's not putting those things that should be in place, so to speak, that society or your parents or your own upbringing or your own friends and family have told you that's their way. Or maybe even, you know, as parents, like often the only frame of reference we've got ourselves is the way that you yourself were raised as a child, right? And you might know wholeheartedly that it didn't really work for you, but that's the only example you were given and shown and taught from an early age. So by default, you know, a lot of those things come through, and it's how you think you should be doing things because, you know, maybe so-and-so showed you that that's how they parented, or for example, and it's tough as a parent, you know, to undo those old conditionings or maybe old ways of existing or old structures, routines, projections, you know. So yeah, it's really just taking all of that and kind of just going, okay, the new paradigm's here. So the world is now in that energy of going, we don't need to do things the way they were done. We're here to do things differently. Our children of now are growing up in such a different world to, you know, myself at 35. Like, I'm an 80s baby. Like, my 15-year-old has grown up in a completely different world to what I grew up in as an 80s child. So, you know, it's just appreciating that and not sort of taking the approach that their existence is wrong because it's different, right? Like, I think that's where sometimes, you know, with so many things, we can get stuck in that sense of going, oh, well, it's different, so it's something to be feared or it's something wrong. So it's kind of just going, okay, how can we take this knowledge, trust and allow, and come at this whole parenting paradigm by, you know, just coming at it from the core of going, let's raise beautiful, wonderful souls, and in a way that nourishes them, right? That these are seeds and seedlings that we're watering, we're nourishing, we're allowing them to thrive, we're giving them the right environment, the right conditions, the right love, and we're ultimately giving them all of that and putting that into them so that they can grow and be their own uniqueness and their own magic. And that's all we're really here for as parents, right? In this new paradigm. So there are so many more aspects to this as being a parent. And I think I'm going to do a whole episode on parenting, I feel, coming up. But as another specific example, I want to just touch on about how human design is so powerful when it comes to understanding parenting. And your child or your inner child, for example, is what we would call digestion within human design. And so there's a whole number of different factors that are super specific to your child. But I love just touching on digestion because it's one that I find so fascinating. And an example of this is like, digestion really comes down to how yourself or your child, for your own unique, what is in your chart, digestion wise, is really how you digest not only life but information, like literally digesting food and drink, but also, you know, like how you learn, how you process information, you know. So it all comes under this, and it's so incredible how there are so many different variations, and your human design chart tells you essentially what your unique version is. So for an example, you can have a whole family who some have got the same digestion type, or everyone has got different. And in our little household, we're all projectors, right? So that's kind of the base level foundation of how we digest life, how we process, how we interact with life, like we just touched on with the energy types. But it also means that projectors have got their own kind of unique way of nourishing themselves, digesting, which means that for the three of us all being projectors, we're all grazers. We all need to refuel little and often throughout the day, and we all have our own unique sensitivities to food, which is incredibly common for projectors and reflectors as well, to have, when it comes to foods and drinks and things, to have sensitivities. And so within our life, we don't put labels on our meals. We don't try and adhere to some, structure, the arbitrary structure. It's an intuitive process that we follow, and we all have kind of learned and adapted the way we follow our own individual rhythms when it comes to food and using our unique digestions, right? So, and this is what you can find out yours when, knowing your human design chart. So what I'm going to talk about is the example of me, Darren, and Amaru, our son. So for me, for example, mine is what in human design is listed as hot thirst, which some of these names and descriptors can sound a bit strange when you first come across them. But essentially what it means for me is that my digestion thrives on things being warm and warming. So when it comes to food and drinks, warm or room temperature is always going to be best and most nourishing for me. It's all to do with like comforting foods, spices, anything that's like warming. And then the other side of it for me is taste. So this is the other component, that everything is to do with taste. And so for Darren, he has what is known, his digestion is called closed taste. So what that translates into, taking it from the human design kind of category and putting it into what, real life words, is that for Darren, he needs simple, consistent routine when it comes to food. Whereas for me, I've got more flexibility to go, do I like the taste of it? And is it warm and comforting? Yep, great. I can go for it. And just within my projector, sort of being more aware that I need to eat little and often, and stuff that is going to fit with all of my, dietary requirements. Because for me, I always like to joke that I'm everything free. Whenever we go somewhere, they're like, what are your dietary requirements? And I just have to sort of say everything free. But it's not quite as dramatic as that. But I know definitely my soul thrives best when everything is very I hate using labels, but clean eating is very much what my soul and body best thrives on. Limited ingredients, as natural as possible, and the two, the non-negotiables for me is no dairy and no gluten. So, anyway, back to talking about Darren. For him, he's got his own sensitivities when it comes to certain foods, things like onions, for example. But his closed taste digestion is that he needs things to be simple. He needs it consistent. He needs it routine when it comes to food. He is super picky, and he is naturally inclined to not even try something. Right? He just knows intuitively if it's correct for him or not. And how many people, like how many of you listening, grew up as kids being forced to try foods, right? By your parents. Like if something was put in front of you, you were just forced to eat it, And so for him and his digestion type is that forcing him to eat something is so incredibly wrong for his digestion. And he also, his secondary part of that is all to do with touch and the sort of, like textural component to foods and things. And so a way that this works in our relationship dynamic, since we are talking about relationships and how this all plays into it, is I learned all of this the hard way very early on in our relationship years, before I knew any of this kind of thing, right? Like 10 years ago. And I used to try and dutifully create, on the weekends, elaborate dinner meals that were based on all these very tasty foods that I loved, warming, spiced. And I would get really kind of, hurt on a certain level when he just didn't vibe with them, right? He would just sort of try and be polite and kind of, make a good hash of it, but then he would scurry off and make a sandwich kind of thing. And what that was it was totally me projecting onto him what my digestion was, and it wasn't aligned for him at all. So, that's immediately one sort of situation where like just even knowing your own individual digestions can be so powerful for how you go about all of those interactions around meals and meal times and things. So for Amaru, he is what is called consecutive appetite. So he's a third type, completely different to us again. And so what this means in real life terms is that he thrives when food is kept really simple and it's like one ingredient at a time type foods, right? So he will eat loads of one thing in one sitting and then move on to the next thing. So how we support him with this is that we often just do a bowl of pasta for dinner and I'll check in with him and he'll just ask for it plain with no sauce. And, for a lot of the time, or occasionally he might go, oh yeah, I'll have a little bit of, the passata tomato based sauce that you've got or cheese or whatever. But he'll eat all of that in one go. And then later on, he'll go and maybe reheat some chicken that we cooked and he'll have that. So he feels really supported as well when he knows the routine of the things that he can eat consecutively during the day, right? So that he can graze on throughout the day and knowing that they're there, that he can go and grab them as it kind of suits him is perfect for him. And he has also what is called external vision as like the secondary component when it comes to this for him. So this is all to do with like the visual of how things look. He's super picky, obviously, because he just wants to stay with like the one plain thing. And so he can spot like a fleck of a herb from a mile away, right? Because it's all to do with the visual of how it looks. So anyway, I want to give an example of like as a relationship dynamic of the three of us, how this works, say at meal times, like as just a real super practical example of like dinner time for us. So, right, we will make a core thing that we can all share at dinner time, for example, that takes into account everybody's sensitivities, everybody's allergies. And so this will usually for us be something like a protein, maybe chicken, for example. And then we cook that communally to make it to suit everybody. And then I add the individual tasty things that I know I love. And so for me, that might be like some sauteed up greens and spices, maybe some curry sort of spices, things like that. And then I'll have that with my protein, the chicken, for example. Darren will add what he knows are his simple, consistent, structured go-tos, his routine foods that he knows work for him. So typically that might be some potatoes or some rice or bread, and then for Amaru, we check in with him and we let him know ahead of time what's being made so that his kind of consecutive appetite can kind of start working, because he'll know what he's sort of been grazing on throughout the day. And then he can decide from maybe a plate of items all separated out, right? So if it's, for example, like Darren's made rice to go with his chicken, we'll let Amaru know. We'll say, okay, we've got rice, we've got chicken. And so he'll have them separated out on the plate, maybe the rice on one side, the chicken on the other. And then he can eat all of one thing before he starts on the next, if he so wants to, right? So, and that also supports him with his external vision, because he digests best while he's not just visually seeing like what's on his plate separated, but he needs like visual stimulation to get his digestion working. So that means that he digests best literally when he's watching something. So that usually means that he's watching YouTube on the iPad while he's eating, and knowing full well for him that visually he needs that stimulation, but also that visually if there's something he won't eat, like he can't even handle having it on his plate, potentially near to the other foods. So it's kind of just understanding that visual component for him is like something he's always been really averse to. He's the kid that like if his what's a good example, like say if we're at a restaurant and something comes out and it's got like a little sprig of parsley on the top, he will need to physically take that parsley and like get rid of it from his plate completely. He can't just put it to one side. It's got to go on like one of our plates or like in the bin, or like visually it's got to be completely gone for him to then be able to sit and comfortably eat his food. And now we know why, because this is all inherent in his design, right? So we no longer need to project onto him, oh, but I enjoy these foods, so you should too, right? New paradigm parenting and relationships. So that's just one example, but I will pull together a parenting episode because as you can tell, like this information just goes even further than meal times. It supports everything from how kids learn, how they process information, the left brain, right brain sort of energetic expression, whether they're needing to be more active or on the move to be able to process life or digest life, or whether they need quiet, or whether they thrive with lots of sound on in the background, so on and so on and so on. It just keeps on going and it's so incredible. Like I could geek out on this stuff all day. So anyway, to now move on to the second part really that carries on the conversation about relationships and how human design is so powerful. I wanted to touch on a few particular things that can be really important to sort of understand, I guess, within not just romantic relationships, but our relationships with the loved ones in our life, the other people in our life, even our co-workers, right? It's just, there's so many things that we can understand energetically that can be so super supportive. So probably the primary one, and this will go for all relationships, but is going to be really a biggie to understand within romantic relationships or relationships with your family that are really close. Is essentially if you are an emotional being or a non-emotional being. And so I say this, this is across the board for all 5 energy types. And this is essentially knowing within your design, is your solar plexus defined, as in colored in brown, or is it white? Is it undefined? Is it open? So if it is colored in, then you are what we would call an emotional being. You've potentially got emotional authority within your chart. And if you're non-emotional, this is you've got undefined solar plexus, or it's completely open, being that there's no lines coming off it at all. So if you've got this defined and you are an emotional energy, what that means is that you've always got some sort of form of emotional wave going on inside you at all times. And that wave of emotion going, through the high to the low looks and feels different for every single person who does have an emotional wave going on. But really what that means is that you will always experience highs and lows, kind of like no matter what is going on in life around you. So it's like life could be fucking amazing, but you're feeling like low as all low because you're in the low of your wave. So really with an emotional center defined is kind of like you just want to know that within any kind of like dynamic in a relationship, you don't want to be saying anything, doing anything, making any decisions unless you are in the cool, calm, central zone of your emotional wave, basically. Like that's the major takeaway for this is that it's kind of like learning the wisdom of going, I know I have, for example, you saying to yourself, okay, I've got my emotional center, my solar plexus defined in my chart. So I have to learn within my relationships, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with your family, I've got to learn to ride my wave. I've got to learn to work with it because it's always going on for me. And I've got to learn to buy myself some time. Learn to observe what that wave looks like for you, whether it's like really subtle and you just have some days where you're just off, or some days where you just feel really like you love life and then it crashes again, whether it's a build up over the space of each month and you suddenly have like a big meltdown cry each month, whether it's like peaks and troughs of like just something will come out of nowhere and you'll be like shoot up high, and then something else might come out of nowhere and you're suddenly like plunged off the edge of a cliff emotionally. It's just learning to observe what that looks like for you. So whether you journal on it, whether you have notes in your phone that just kind of keep a track of, what it is that actually is going on for you. And it's really just learning to not be impulsive or reactive in your relationships, right? So the challenge that comes with having your emotional center defined is that society and our conditioning, and usually the way we've been kind of raised and exposed to media, has told us that particularly in our male and female interactions, there are patriarchal and traditional roles when it comes to emotions that individual people are supposed to fulfill, right? So if you are male or male identifying and you have your emotional center defined, you'll most likely have been told from a really young age that emotions are not for you, right? You've probably tried to battle the fact internally that you do have a constant emotional response going on. And chances are that unless you've been raised new paradigm, you probably haven't been given that license or empathy or permission to understand that it is okay to have emotions and feelings. The male and male identifying people of the world are probably given that kind of message that emotions are a negative thing and that you're supposed to be cool, calm, and collected all the time, and that you're supposed to be the strong stoic, not have the emotional response. So meanwhile, as a female or female identifying, there are all the stereotypes that exist about how, if you are female identifying, that there's the cry at a drop of a hat, or be emotional, or get hysterical in situations, or not be able to stay calm. All those really crappy stereotypes that we're told that go either way, and shown to both male and female identifying people that, as we grow up, these real just outdated, crappy stereotypes. And we need to kind of have disbanded them as of yesterday, But anyway, to some extent, the way we can look at this is when it comes to human design is so empowering, because we can go, okay, got two people in a relationship who are, for example, both have their emotional centers defined. Doesn't matter, male, female, whatever, identifying. If you've got two souls and they, in their human design chart, have both got their solar plexus defined, it's so empowering, because you can basically get to know, like, hey, look, in our relationship, in our dynamic, we both have emotional waves going on all the time. So if I just come home and need to vent or have a big release of emotion that's the part of my wave that's going on all the time, then please don't take it personally. Be there for me, support me, or just be a listening ear. But like, almost like learning that objectivity and that wisdom to be able to observe it and be able to communicate, because that's such a key thing, right, in all our relationships, is being able to communicate what's going on without judgment, without like getting self-judgy, especially, and just to say, look, hey, I'm feeling like I want to have a meltdown about this, or I'm about to have a meltdown, and I'm not aiming it at you, or it's not about you, or it's nothing that you've done. It's kind of as well, like, even just learning to be able to give yourself a toolkit of ways, like almost that if you've got your wave is about to need that release of pressure, or that you're feeling like from past experience that you do just need to have a big cry or whatever, or that you need to vent, or it's like having your toolkit of ways that you can like communicate with the other person to say, I'm just going to go take myself off for a bit. I'm going to go put myself in timeout. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go to the gym. Like learning to express that energetic of the emotion in a productive way, right? Like it's going like, emotions are not inherently bad. Like they're there for a reason. Your soul came here to experience emotion. So like, learn how to work with it. Learn how to express it in a healthy way. Go punch a punching bag in your garage, or like go get in your car with the radio blasting and like scream along at the top of your lungs to a song for like half an hour. You know, it's like, just learn the ways that you can empower yourself or your partner or whoever is in the relationship with you, whether it's friend, family. The emotions are not negative, and they can be expressed in a really healthy way. So then, for example, on the other hand, the non-emotionals, right? Like people who have got either their emotional center undefined, so like there might be some lines coming off it, or that they have got nothing coming off it, like in my case, and it's completely open. Again, this is where like all those stereotypes need to just be left behind as we move into the new paradigm, because like I say, for me personally, I'm non-emotional. And I have a completely open solar plexus. So what that means is that I can speak very in the moment about things and keep a cool head, right? Like if I'm true to myself and grounded in myself, and I've not absorbed the energetics of the world around me, I can actually have this very grounded and very practical conversation in the moment, and emotions kind of don't come into it for me, right? Like I don't go through my day feeling sort of ups and downs of emotion. I just am I am what I am, and I'm very used to that, and it kind of, I don't see it as anything unusual. But I've had so many times in my life when friends have said to me, you know, wow, you are just like the most chilled out person in this situation, or that particular thing happened and you were just like the most cool-headed person about it, you know, just because for me, that's my true center, is that I'm not having a emotional based reaction to it. Obviously, I can feel the range of emotions, but typically it's from stuff outside of me, external to me, that create that emotional reaction within me. It's not something that I've got going on within me all the time in a wave, right? So, however, if I'm in a relationship with someone else who is emotionally defined, if they've got their solar plexus defined and they've got their wave going on, and I'm interacting with that defined emotional center, what happens for me is that energetically, without me even realizing, is I absorb and I also amplify whatever emotion they've got going on, whatever they're feeling, and I do it without realizing it. So if I've been around anyone with like a defined solar plexus, or in an environment that's highly charged emotionally, or not even highly charged, you know, it can be very subtly charged, but I'll just be hit with this supercharged feeling of emotion that isn't mine, but it like comes out of nowhere, and I have no idea what to do with all of that because it's not mine, but I've absorbed it. And it's like, you can think of all these, you know, undefined or open centers within your chart. It can be like a sponge, right? It soaks it all up. And it was incredibly difficult to grow up with this, but not know what was going on. And now I understand and I've got the wisdom. But at the time, it was like, what the fuck, basically? Like, to go from being this cool, calm, you know, just chill person in my own space to then walking in a room and feeling the emotion so deeply. It's very hard. Like if you're a non-emotional person in a relationship, and maybe the other person is, for example, a really good example to use for this is like if that person with the emotionally defined center, you know, they come home and they've got their built up wave and it just needs to release, rather than taking it out on, you know, towards their partner who is feeling everything but like super amplified and they're blindsided by this wave of emotion that's just come through the door, put the new paradigm glasses on, put that lens on and look through it and go, okay, actually I can learn and I can empower myself as an emotional person how to discharge or release all of that emotion at the door or before I even come in the door, right? And the same goes for a non-emotional person who maybe has been at work all day in their office, for example, and has unknowingly soaked up all the energetics of the day, and they're carrying this amplified emotion, stress, whatever, as they walk in the door at home. And it's learning how to have those really good self-care practices to discharge all of that and get back to your own clean slate, so to speak, so that you don't end up carrying that around and then projecting it potentially onto your partner because you just don't know what to do with it, right? So it's taking the wisdom and going, okay, I've unknowingly absorbed all of this and I just have to have my routine every day to discharge it before I even walk in the door. So as a practical example for Darren and I within our relationship, this is something I've found so incredibly powerful to understand because we are both non-emotional, right? Like neither of us has our solar plexus defined. So now we know, like, we don't even need to question that if there's something feeling in like a heightened emotion in one of us or between us, it's coming from something outside both of us. We know that now, and it's not actually anything to do with the other person. So it's like, okay, now rather than reacting to it and being like, oh, what the fuck's wrong with you? We can be detectives and kind of just like hone in on where that emotion is coming from, or where that anxiety is coming from, or where that, sort of stress is coming from. And it's not a bad thing at all to feel emotion. It's learning to witness it, learning to observe it, and kind of like just acknowledge that it's there, but also learn how to discharge and have really good boundaries so that you're not taking on other people's shit, which for me particularly is something I was so heavily conditioned to do. And I just did without even realizing, because I grew up with creating all these coping strategies because I had this open emotional center that I was like, I just avoided communicating because I feared it would always lead to an argument, and I couldn't handle the emotion of an argument. Some people thrive off having a heated debate or no, for me, I'm like, no, avoid heated, elevated voices at all costs because I feel it so deeply. And, so the other coping strategies were all the sort of the golden few of like people pleasing, learning to not rock the boat, don't speak my mind, all of those things, because I couldn't handle the emotional toll it would take on me if any of those things sort of happen. So I kind of now have got the wisdom, and I've done the work to go on myself to go, okay, I now know how I can make sure that I've got really good boundaries to protect myself from all of that emotional external stuff, but also how to flush every day. Make sure my environment is really supportive for me, and know that it's not anything that's within me. So if I'm feeling something, it's like become the detective in your own life rather than blaming the rest of the world for maybe how you're feeling. So another couple of places that I just want to touch on that can be really powerful to know as well in the relationship dynamic is that so the G center, the big diamond shape that's in the central chest area of your human design chart. So if this is defined or undefined, there's a whole range of ways that can show up in a relationship. So your G center is your higher self. It's your center of self-love. It's your center of love for others. If you've got this defined, it'll be yellow within your chart. It's a big yellow diamond shape. And if it's undefined, it'll be white. And really what this is that if it's defined, you've got a pretty solid sense of like who you are, who your sort of self-identity is. And you also kind of give off that quite easily to the outside world. However, if this is white for you, you don't have that sense of security in terms of who you are, but the wisdom is that you potentially are open and, have got that unlimited capacity to just love anyone and everything, and which you do as well if you've got it defined. But if you've got it undefined, there's sort of there's more of an openness there to take in the world, right? And to learn that wisdom of really stepping into your higher self. And so what can happen in relationships particularly is that if you don't have this defined, if it's white for you in your chart and you are in a relationship or in a situation with someone who has got their G center defined, you will easily feel the sort of need to become the chameleon, right? You will absorb the other person's identity. So this can be a real, I guess, quick guide to sort of know in relationships whether there's potentially codependency going on because you've absorbed the other person's identity, so to speak, and you sort of think that it's your own, but it's not. And hell, I've been there and done that many times in many different variations of friendships and relationships that I've absorbed and just kind of totally become the chameleon to try and fit in because I didn't know what my own sense of self-identity was. And so it can really be powerful to just know that if you are defined, it's a beautiful thing and you've got so many gifts to share, and you can, chances are, if it's hooked into your throat chakra, you can speak straight from your higher self and really easily share those gifts for self-love and empowerment and higher self knowledge with the world. And if you've got it undefined, then you've got the ability to go, okay, I've got beautiful wisdom at my disposal, I'm open to the world, and you can just lean into knowing that you can support yourself by ensuring that your environment is really supportive of you, because for undefined G centers, environment is everything. So making sure that you're supporting yourself by having the correct environment for you to thrive in, that's really aligned to also, whether that's your home, whether that's your workplace, whether that's your people that you're with, your community of people, your soul group of friends, all of those things are going to really allow you to thrive and to shine and to develop your own sense of what your true identity is. Because when you're with the aligned people in your life, you won't actually absorb their characteristics. You'll know for certain kind of where you end and the other person begins, so to speak. And then just lastly, I want to touch on that another biggie for relationships is people who've got sacral definitions. So hello, generators, many gens, this is you guys. And then anyone else who has got an undefined sacral. So within relationships, people who've got their sacral chakra defined, the many gens and generators, they're constantly emitting buzz, right? Life force, vibrational, energetics. They're just putting it out into the world as their motor is like running all day long, beautiful energy, charisma, magnetic, sacral, delicious energy, right? Like it's wonderful. And if you are undefined here, so 70% of the world have got their sacral chakra defined. The other 30% are basically absorbing that energy. So if you are in a relationship, romantic, friendship, parent, whatever, if you are undefined in your sacral, the other person who has got that definition is going to be unknowingly giving you sacral chakra energy all day long, and you are going to be absorbing it. So for a projector, as myself, a really good example of this is that if I'm around generators or many gens, I can hook into their sacral chakra energy and kind of get a high off it, right? I can absorb it. And again, remember, you amplify these things through our undefined or open centers. So I absorb it, I amplify it, but it's not my own. So what I'm doing in effect is feeling like, oh my God, I've got all this energy going on, but it's like my gas tank's empty and I'm just running on the fumes. So it's knowing the wisdom of, hey, this energy actually isn't my own, and I can get a quick kind of burst off it and be really energized and be able to kind of like enjoy it, but knowing that it's not sustainable, and that if I lean too much into just go, and that kind of like amplified version of that sacral energy, I am going to burn out because I'm using something that's not actually there. So it's the understanding of those dynamics can be just so fucking powerful, because you can know, okay, I've actually been around someone I'm riding off their energy, but it's not my own. And, the same goes for reflectors, same goes for manifestors as well. So, it just can be so super powerful to know that dynamic as well, because then when that other person goes away, for example, who's got the sacral defined, then it's like your battery's gone. So, it's kind of like knowing as well that and just that. Also, to remove any sense of self-judgment. Like, I've got really good friend who is like, I'm a generator, but my partner's a projector, right? So the generator is like feeling guilty because they're like, oh, well, I just can do stuff all day long, but my partner keeps saying to me, like, can you just take a break, or like, leave me in peace? Because there's this guilt, right, that comes in with, particularly in romantic relationships, of going, oh, but why are we not operating at the same energy level? Or why are you able to do so much more and all I want to do is sit on the couch and read my book, and they're doing all these chores around the home on a weekend, and all of a sudden you're doubting yourself and going, oh my God, they're judging me. And you can see how easily you can start to spiral into out of alignment thinking, judgmental thinking, separation, all of those things. Whereas it actually, if you can be empowered to go, hey, I'm a projector and I need to go have a nap at 3:00 this afternoon. If you want to go mow the lawns, crack on with it and enjoy burning your sacral energy off. But I am not going to judge myself because I know that my energy works in a really different way. So it's just, at the end of the day, it is so empowering. It is so super, I think, important for relationships of all kinds to know the specific interactions and specific dynamics. And obviously it can come into play in even just little things like between sacral generators, mani-gens, and people who've got an undefined sacral chakra, knowing like if you are in a romantic relationship and you're sharing the same bed, you're going to be absorbing that sacral chakra energy even while you're sleeping. And so they say particularly for, if you're a non-energy type, like get the opportunity to sleep on your own occasionally, whether that is like a night's sleep on your own every now and then, or whether that's even just getting to nap on your own, so that you can actually kind of sleep in your own aura. Because particularly for projectors, like remember your aura is projecting out and into the other person really deeply. So it's kind of just knowing that you do need to be really aware of the fact that that energetic interaction is going on, whether you realize it or not. So you can really support yourself to get that rest and recharge time by having the opportunity to nap or sleep alone every now and then. It's just something to be aware of and just to recognize, because these things are so fascinating as to how it all works, how it all interacts, and especially when you start putting into relationships, to just go, hey, you know what? We've got this tool at our disposal, so let's start seeing the ways we can empower ourselves to thrive. Because at the end of the day, nothing is a negative. That's just like something I'm so passionate about sharing, that it's like, let's stop putting judgment or separation into the picture and just go, actually, you know what? We are all here to be different. We're not here to be homogenous, same. We're not here to be living according to a different paradigm. We're not here to be living life as if it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. We're here to be living into the future and thriving into the future. And we know how many places and situations where things have not been working. So let's use the tools we've got to go, let's live a more conscious life. Let's live a more a life full of permission and permission slips to be your own true unique self. that's just, if that's anything you can take away from this episode, that is my heartfelt message that I would love to share with you today. So of course, as always, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for listening in. I hope you love this episode. It's something that I probably haven't talked as much about as I'd love to in terms of the dynamics, the parenting, the relationships. It's probably more been sharing a lot to do with the sort of detail of how human design works and the purpose and finding your soul's purpose. So I do want to start sharing more about this kind of more real world, how it looks, how it can come into play across the board in our lives. So if you're listening in, if you're loving all of this, if you've got an episode you particularly vibe with, tag me in any screenshots, let me know you're listening. And of course, if you've got questions, come and hang out and let me know. I love chatting about all things to do with human design. You guys know this. So feel free to jump into my DMs. Let me know if it's resonating with you. Leave me a comment. And of course, while we're talking about fun geeking out on human design, if you are really vibing with it, I've got a Facebook group completely dedicated to coming up with a few discussion points, bits of information that's all to do with human design, kind of like a book club, but not really a book club. It's like a human design hub, I think I want to call it. So the link to join is in the show notes if you are interested, and you can jump on in there, or you can just look it up straight on Facebook. And the group is called Lotus Life Human Design with Rose Tautari. So as always, thank you so much, gorgeous soul, for being here. I so appreciate you. Virtual hugs through the microphone, and I will catch you on the next episode.